for joining us for this portion of the event. And we're going to be discussing the film. As Dr. Lester has talked about earlier, this is still a very timely film to talk about. Even though this happened back in 2017, we're still facing a lot of acts, hate crimes, Islamophobia, xenophobia. So we're here to discuss that today and also talk about why it's so empowering to have diverse communities come together, which I think the film touched on as well. So I'm going to introduce our panelist. And so this is Dr. Yasmin Saikia right next to me. She is one of the 100 inspiring Indian Muslim women in the United States by the RBTC Global Leadership Team and the first holder of the Hart, I cannot pronounce, Nikachos Endowed Chair in Peace Studies at Arizona State University. Dr. Saikia offers an academic perspective on Islamophobia within the US. She's currently the co-director of the Center of Muslim Experience in the US at ASU and editor-in-chief of Cambridge for the Cambridge University Press's new series, Muslim South Asia. And then over here at the end of the table is Dr. Suad Ali. She's an internationally acclaimed scholar. She is the head of the Classics and Middle Eastern Studies, the founding chair of the ASU Council for Arabic and Islamic Studies, the coordinator of Arabic Studies, and an affiliate faculty member in the Center for the Study of Religion and Conflict. She's also a recipient of several awards, including the ASU Faculty Women's Association Outstanding Graduate Mentor Award and the ASU Advisor of the Year. So thank you all for joining us today for this discussion. Dr. Lee, I just want to make sure, is your microphone unmuted? Yes. Before we start. Okay, there you go. Yours is unmuted, so it's ready to go. So as Dr. Lester has introduced me a bit, so I'm here facilitating kind of from an interfaith perspective, and the film touched a lot on the importance of bringing different faiths together and for people understanding different faith communities. I have a background in being an interfaith organizer during my undergrad experience at ASU. So I was part of an organization called Sun Devils Are Better Together. We were a student organization, part of the Interfaith Youth Corps of America. And we did a lot of events on campus and within the community that centered around uniting people of different faiths and non-faiths together to talk and learn and listen about each other and what our backgrounds are and, you know, how we differ, but that also how we can come together. So I did that for about 4 years, and I was on the executive board of that organization for 2 years as a media specialist. But I also help plan a lot of the events and facilitate some of those as well. So when framing the conversation, we're going to be talking about how we can make lasting and forward-moving paths to bring people together despite our fundamental differences. And a lot of those times, those fundamental differences are our faiths or lack of faith. And also, we're going to talk about some tools and ways that we can connect with each other and also understand each other. And so one of the things that I think we need to do in response to this film is recognize the rhetoric and the myths about Islam that perpetuate a negative view of it. So I would like for each of our panelists to name the 2 biggest myths that they would like to dispel about Islam and or the Arabic community, as these are often conflated. Which one of you would like to go first?
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Lester, and thank you, Dr. Sakia, and thank you, Ray. Thank you for coming, all of you. Probably Islamophobia is the major thing that comes to mind right away as we watch such a very disturbing incident as the burning of the mosque and such a touching film, um, a town called Victoria. So I'm going to read a definition by the United Nations of Islamophobia as a fear, prejudice, and hatred of Muslims that leads to provocation, hostility, and intolerance by means of threatening harassment, abuse, incitement, and intimidation of Muslims and non-Muslims, both in um, the online and offline world, motivated by institutional, ideological, political, and religious hostility that transcends into structural and cultural racism. It targets the symbols and makers of being a Muslim. And of course, the mosque is the most visible symbol of Muslims. So their place where they worship, their place where they gather, where they hold their community and gatherings. Um, the beginning of the film, the introducer asked if you can relate to any of these incidents that you would watch. And being a professor at Arizona State University and having lived almost 19 years here in Tempe, there is a mosque in Tempe, small, Islamic community center. And of course, we do identify with that because, for example, at the prayer, the Friday prayer, even though I don't attend the mosque as much as other people, but the Friday prayer that my husband's usually attends because mostly I teach on Fridays, and you're not required to attend the mosque. You go voluntarily, but most people go to the Friday prayer. So many times when they come out of the prayer on Friday, they find many hate groups shouting against Islam, and especially after the executive order of Dawn that incited the burning of the mosque in Victoria and in many, many other different. And so, such a definition of the United Nations emphasizes the link between institutional levels of Islamophobia and manifestations of such attitudes triggered by the visibility of the victim's perceived Muslim identity. This approach also interprets Islamophobia as a form of racism, whereby Islamic religion, tradition, and culture are seen as a threat to the Western world and Western values. Some experts prefer the label anti-Muslim hatred, fearing that the term Islamophobia risks condemning all critiques of Islam and therefore could stifle freedom of expression. But international human rights law protects individuals, not religions, and Islamophobia may also affect non-Muslims based on perceptions of nationality, racial, or ethnic background.
Thank you. I think that kind of goes into what we were talking about how often times the notions of Islamophobia are conflated with xenophobia. And it's the recognition of the other that, oh, this is someone that I don't understand their culture, I don't understand their religion. So this is why I hate them, for example. And that happens a lot with other different races and cultures as well. And I think you kind of talked about one myth that people have to go to the prayers on Friday and people don't have to do that all the time. And Dr. Saikia, what are your two myths that you would like to dispel?
First of all, thank you everybody for coming and for giving us this opportunity to have this discussion with you. We'd like to keep it as conversational as possible. So we'll just answer some of the few questions initially from May, and then we hope we will have a conversation discussion with you. The two myths that I have often seen or encountered, or from reading and from listening, and also from this movie. One is that Muslims are violent. Anytime there is some violence happening somewhere, it's immediately, particularly in the US, when it happens, you start immediately, is it a Muslim person who did it? Because it's always somehow Islam and Muslims and violence are becoming like, correlated terms, right? So I find many of us, even Muslims like us, feel we need to constantly guard ourselves against this and constantly keep thinking, I hope it's not a Muslim person who did this, because it's become so naturalized, right? The other thing is, I often find people thinking that Muslim women are very oppressed. And particularly if they are wearing the hijab, the veil, or cover themselves, they think they're oppressed to wear that way and be that way. And so those, for men, it is violence. For women, it is oppression. Two of the kind of constant myth that seems to pervade. And when you take that community together, men and women together, one thing that even today we hear as things are happening outside of America in the Middle East, the thing of barbarism, that Muslims are barbaric, uncivilized, barbaric people. So somehow these things are all put together when it comes to evaluating a group of people who are diverse and comes from many different cultures and nationalities, but then are all pegged into these kind of boxes. And somehow you have to disprove it. That's what I find. It's like you are already guilty of it. You have to now prove that you're innocent of not being violent and not being oppressed and having a voice of your own and not barbaric and like everybody else.
Thank you. And we were talking about in our pre-event meeting how exhausting that can be, to always having to defend yourself or to educate people about who you are or what you're not. And that's something that we will touch on later on in this conversation. And so another question that kind of came up during my mind in the film was the fact that they had to target a place of worship. And I think Dr. Ali was talking about how the mosque is usually a sign of Islam, and that's a very visible place that you can go to and kind of target and have a fire that you can set on it and to kind of show your hatred toward a specific religion. So my question for both of you is, what was the significance of a hate crime targeting a place of worship? And how does faith influence that story? And is it really faith that people target, or is it more xenophobia or being scared of the other?
Thank you, Ray, very much indeed. Very important question. Um, Definitely fear of the other with a capital O. And this is based on lack of information. And I think education is the key word to fight against that. And especially for us as professors, and we teach classes on, Islamic studies and cultural studies. Education is very important, not by us all only as professors, but also by those religious leaders in the community. And for example, people do not know much about Islam, and that's why they hate Muslims, and they think, as Professor Saikia said, that they think they're terrorists, they think they're all of those labels that they give them because of the lack of information. They don't know that it is not only the Judeo-Christian tradition, it is the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition. And people don't know that the Holy Quran, which is the sacred book for believing Muslims, includes all of the prophets mentioned in the Torah, all of the prophets mentioned in the gospel, in the Bible. And there are many different verses in the Quran that actually, if people know them, they know that this is not a foreign religion or a terrorist religion. Even the word Islam itself stems from the Arabic word salam, silm. From that uh, root comes the word salam, which is the Arabic for peace. And if I want to greet you in Arabic, I would say assalamu alaikum. peace be upon you. And from that comes the word Islam. Other verses in the Quran, let there be no compulsion in religion, that those even Muslim radicals are guilty of, trying to portray Islam as something that is not actually what the Quran says. And there is a whole chapter in the Quran, chapter 19, is called Maryam, the Arabic Maryam, anglicized as Mary. Chapter 19 is about Mary, the mother of Jesus. And the Quran says, addressing the Quran is perceived as being addressed to the Prophet Muhammad by the Archangel Gabriel. We created you from a single soul. We created you as people so that you may know each other, know that you may despise each other. And Christians and Jews are addressed in the Quran as the people of the book, because both of them had a book before Islam, and the whole Quran was addressed to the Prophet. Many times in the Quran addressing them as, and Christians and the Jews and the books and that. So it's education that I think that can address those areas that some people perceive as hatred because they just don't know. And I will stop here and give my colleague, Dr. Saikia, to continue, and then we can maybe have a question. Thank you.
Okay, the question that you raise is why are mosques being targeted or attacked, as we have seen in this particular documentary? And we also know that similar incidents have happened right here in Tempe. The Islamic Center in Tempe that Professor Suad Ali had mentioned was also attacked. Not burned down or anything, but people vandalized it. They took their children to the place to vandalize and actually posted it on social media to show we can do this to you, right? It has also happened that extremist groups have come and have done demonstrations against the Muslim community in front of the mosque. Now, why do we attack mosque in this particular video that we saw, this documentary, and there are many other incidents across the United States that you will find that people go and attack the mosque. They don't come to your home, perhaps, because they cannot really identify you as a Muslim, right? Like, I'm a Muslim, but who will look at me and think that I'm a Muslim? So they're not going to come attack me when I'm walking in the streets, right? But if I wear a hijab, perhaps I would be, maybe I would hear something. But a mosque for Muslims, like Christians and Jews and Hindus and Buddhists and all groups of people, their religious side, their religious space where they go to pray, they consider it to be the house of God. This is where you come and pray together to God. So mosque is a house of God for Muslims, but it is also more than a prayer place. It is a community place. So when you attack a mosque in some way, you're telling the community that we don't want you here, as we saw in one of the person telling here that it was an eviction notice in a way, get out of here, right? So your place of worship is not here. This is a sacred place for us, and people like you don't belong. And also we heard in this particular documentary, they mentioned that they think of Islam as a demonic cult, right? It's a cult, a demonic cult, some monsters and demons, and we need to purge you out of here. So in a way, the xenophobia that we see, or in every expression, it is some kind of, you're taking recourse to some larger idea, whether you believe it or not, you're pretending that you symbolize or you represent that idea, right? So when you attack the mosque, you are not trying to say, I'm a good American or I'm a good Indian or whatever community you want to prove. In India, by the way, I'm originally from India. This happens all the time. Mosques are attacked all the time, so much so that they are dismantled, broken, razed to the ground, historic mosques that are 500-600 years old. So what is the message you are giving? You're basically telling the people that you don't belong here. Your worship is something we do not approve. You are praying to something that we think is demonic, and people like you should we should basically evict this place, should get out of here. And mosque, when you attack the mosque, you actually attack the people, because as I said, for them, it's a community place. And this community place has a very sentimental value to it. Like when I first watched this documentary, I started crying. I'm like, it's happening in Victoria. And why am I crying in Tempe about the loss of a mosque, right? But it is a trauma for a community when a place that you consider to be a place to get together as a community is destroyed. In a way, they're destroying your heart, because religion is a matter of the heart. And when the mosque is attacked, your heart is attacked. And I think that is the bottom line for whatever religion you come from. When your church is attacked, you feel that something inside you is destroyed. And that is what I think we need to keep in mind. Under the guise of nationalism, what we are doing is we are destroying one another.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sahia. I just wanted to go back to the point that Dr. Ali had brought up, is that something that I had learned in my time having Muslim friends and visiting mosques and learning more about the religion was that Islam actually has a lot of similarities with Christianity. And if we take the time to talk to someone who is Muslim or practices the faith, and ask them, hey, like, you know, what similarities do we have? You will learn that, oh, they actually do have Mary in the Quran, and they do actually respect Mary. And one of the things growing up Catholic, in which Mary is a big part of the religion, is that I found, oh wow, like that's actually something that, just based off rhetoric that's in the media, I would have thought, Muslims, because they reject Jesus, because they came after Christianity in some way, twisting it to think that to be Muslim is to be anti-Christian in some way, that, oh, they don't respect Jesus at all and they don't respect Mary. And so how can we live in peace if, this religion rejects everything? And I think that comes from every religion that comes after Christianity. Is there some sort of like idea? And even with Jews, I've heard rhetoric that, Jews reject Jesus, so this is why people are like anti-Semitic. And when we learn that, no, like in Islam at least, that they respect Jesus as a prophet and they also respect Mary, and there's a whole book in the Quran about that we can learn that, there's reasons more to not hate a certain religious group. And even when we talk with people of other religions about why they don't believe in certain things and understand their cultures and their theologies, you can humanize the reasons behind this. So kind of going into learning more about Islam, how can we prevent communities from being pitted against each other, and how can we facilitate solidarity among and within racial, ethnic, and marginalized groups?
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Ray. I think, one very important aspect of the film is that when they gather together, when they all came together, and Omar thought, we didn't know how many people will show up. And then it turned out to be a very huge crowd. They began speaking to each other, began to know each other. So knowing each other is a very key word here, and knowing each other is very key to understanding each other, even though they can be different. And I hope that people can understand that, in the Quran, and in the Hadith, which is the narrative of what the Prophet said, there is a narrative that says, um, disagreement among my nation is mercy. And so mercy, is mentioned in the film. Mercy is mentioned by the pastor who was preaching, both the white and black pastors. And it is a very, very important word that people, when they have compassion to each other, every chapter in the Quran, except for one of the 114 chapters, begins in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. So knowing each other, I think, will break so many of those, barriers between people and between religions and cultures, and even for those people who do not believe in religion, agnostic people, and so on. But when we speak about, vandalizing mosques and attacking mosques, we also remember that some synagogues have been, also attacked, and this hate crime and those kind of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia go, line in line to get together, and this is what we just should all fight, and by knowing each other, by gathering, community work together, and is key as well. And I think in addition to the first thing that I mentioned, education, to know each other. And so when they were talking to each other, and Omar's wife or the other guy's wife, she said when she told her grandmother, "Thank you." She said she thought he was Hispanic. And then she didn't know that he was a Muslim. And when she said he was a Muslim, she said, oh, she feared that, those terrorist people and so on. So this is the first impression that can, be, defeated by knowing each other, by coming together, by having those gatherings and knowing information about the other religion, the other culture, and so on. That's what we do as we teach, at SU and in our communities, and that's what we encourage, and that we also encourage those religious people to do, and also parents and families, and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sakia.
This is, I think, one example of how communities can come together. This documentary has brought such a variety of people together to see this film and empathize and develop compassion for one another. So more of these kind of community interaction of various different groups of religious groups need to sit together often and do it through something that people can relate to. Like in the classroom, we teach books and, we teach something for exams and to grade students. That's very different from these kind of community interactions. We can get together through food. In fact, I would like to make a pitch to you. We will be organizing an interfaith community dinner next year during Ramadan, the month of fasting. And we would love to include people who are here today in that dinner together, so that we can understand what fasting is and what it means in different communities to be fasting together and learning from one another. So communities coming together is not very difficult if there is a will. But in this particular documentary, what really struck me was precisely this intimacy that you see within the communities. The different groups of people were able to come together despite a massive loss in one, because they knew one another, because they worked together, like they played together in the football thing. They, referee, they were part of YMCA and all kinds of community activities. So I think in Phoenix, we are so sometimes segregated because of the physical distance of the place. We don't feel like traveling like half an hour from one place to another place. So we need to become more localized, I would think. Tempe is actually Phoenix, West Phoenix, East Phoenix Valley, Scottsdale, wherever you are. I think more community interaction. We do have one very good organization at ASU called CORA, the Council of the Religious Advisors, that bring together Jewish, Muslim, variety of Christian groups, Buddhist, all kinds of people. And I think we should take greater advantage of that group in order to do community get-togethers and community interaction, because it can be very useful and instructional. I remember I once did a film festival kind of stuff for peace, learning from one another. And it was an interfaith discussion where we watched a film called The Imam and the Pastor, which was about Nigeria and the kind of Muslim Christian violence in that place, and how the Imam and the pastor came together to become peace actors. And they have become now quite internationally known, so much so that they have also been nominated for the International Nobel Peace Prize. When we had the discussion, My students were very surprised that a Muslim imam and a Christian pastor can actually have conversations together. They had never thought that this was possible. So we need to do more of these kind of interaction and expose it to young people so that they imbibe this idea that there is not a great deal of difference. Difference is not to be feared, it has to be understood. And once we understand, we can learn to live with one another without trying to convert the other into our religion, whatever that is.
Thank you so much. And actually, that brings me to one of our panelists who is not here today. He was a representative and executive director of the Arizona Interfaith Movement, which is one of the two Arizona wide interfaith movements that we have here. The other one is the Arizona Faith Network. And these two groups are the ones that I know of that have the largest network of different faith communities and non-faith communities, and they do different events on religious activities that you can attend to that are meant to be interfaith, which means that it would bring a lot of people from the community together. And so in the resources email that we'll send out after this event, I will include the websites to those two organizations so you can know more, and also Cora, as Dr. Sekia has mentioned, so that you can get into interfaith events and know more about them and attend them. And I will also probably try and get back into those now as we're talking about this. It's kind of reigniting my interest in doing those activities. So the last question that I have before we open it up to the Q&A is something that Dr. Sekia had mentioned, that you were, your organizations were partly attacked after the Muslim ban happened. And so my question is, how has your community healed from that trauma or the act of violence? You can say violence in words or violence in comments or, you know, emails that are threatening. So how has your community and your institution healed from that? And that's a question for both of y'all.
Thank you very much indeed. As founding chair of the ASU Council for Arabic and Islamic Studies, part of our mission is that the Council's research and teaching programs seek to promote multiculturalism, diversity, interfaith dialogue, cross-cultural understanding, and the expansion of human civilization and cultures through Arabic as well as other Middle Eastern languages and Islamic languages such as Turkish and Persian and Urdu and whatever that we have in the School of International Letters and Cultures. My own conviction has always been literature is often conceived as a cultural tool towards greater human understanding. The more we study others' literary arts, cultures, and civilizations, the better enabled to become and to become able to achieve understanding and to work towards world peace, especially with what's happening now in the world, including the Middle East, including other areas where we get very worried about all civilians' lives lost. And yeah, we do receive some of those, you know, that Ray mentioned. I personally, and I encourage my colleagues in the Council for Arabic Islamic Studies in our Arabic Studies program that I had, and in our section that I had also Classics and Middle Eastern Studies, and to just work toward peace and to, you know, to call people for understanding. We have so many events. We have lecture series, we have film series, we have discussion groups, and we work. You know, I'm also affiliated with the Center for the Study of Religion and Conflict with Dr. Saki as well, and the other center for that she mentioned. We all work together, and I'm happy that there is also this new center of the Muslim experience in the U.S. that my good friends, Dr. Sakia and Dr. Chad Haynes, her husband, also created. And then we should just come together and promote peace and peace on earth. So we hope that everything, will become better through peace and through understanding. Thank you very much.
I attend two mosques mostly in this area. One is the ICC, the Islamic Cultural Center, which is kind of the ASU mosque now. It's within the university. And so whenever I'm on campus, I just go rush there and do my prayers. And I live up north, so I also attend the ICNEB, the Islamic Center of Northeast Valley. Now, they're completely different mosque. And in the Northeast Valley Mosque is highly securitized. It's a new mosque. It's rich doctors who can, have big security and things like that. But when the New Zealand incident had happened, I remember there were a lot of different people from many different communities who came to the mosque to express their sympathies, including the mayor and all kinds of politicians also who showed up. So there has been a reaching out of outpouring of support and to tell the Muslims in that Northeast Valley that you are one of us, because so many of them are doctors in the Mayo Clinic. Now, in ICC, when the vandalism had happened, I think the ICC manages its relationship with the town extremely well. And because it is part of ASU, and we have a very dynamic young imam, Omar Tawil, he has really opened up the mosque to all community people to come and interact and get to learn Islam a little more. So there are all kinds of sessions. So the way they have healed is by opening up rather than closing down and letting people know Muslims better. The other thing I have also noticed that they do quite well in that, particularly ICC, is actually talking about it among the people. And on Friday sermons, they talk about it, not to dwell on the negative, as we also saw in this documentary, but to actually say how strong we are as a community, because we are all part of this together. So they talk about it, and that is, I think, a great way to not just push it aside, be aware of problems, but also plan and look at the positive side, that you're part of community. ASU recognizes you. You're the chaplain of this in the Islamic chaplain in the university. So let's work together. And as they have said, all the Cora group had come together very well after the vandalism. And these kind of community strengthening and reinforcing each other because of faith and not because of a lack of faith has allowed people to move on and really actually feel quite entrenched in the community as American and as Muslims.
Thank you so much. And I would go forward to kind of add something that our interfaith group had done after these attacks, especially the Muslim ban, was that we decided to embrace the differences that we had politically, because we started to learn that people started to polarize more during the 2016 elections. And that was from political views. And we tended to lean more on the progressive side. And so we tried to invite conservative voices, and we did have people who were more conservative in our group. And we decided to embrace that and not let it break us apart. So what we did is we used to have signs that said, I'm a Muslim, ask me a question. I'm a Hindu, ask me a question. I'm Catholic. And so we would usually stand outside at First Friday, and we would have those signs, and people would really see it as a really great sign that, hey, we're all fundamentally different, but we can work together and we can be friends. And so we started to do that with politics. And we had a Trump supporter or two in our group who was actually one of the core members of the group. And we had people who voted for Bernie Sanders. We had people who voted for the independents. I can't remember their name of that year, but people from the Green Party. So we would all stand together and we would all say, hey, you know what? We all voted for different people, but we can be united in the fact that we believe that we're all human and that there are human elements that bring us together and that we can still be friends and not fight each other. And I think that polarization is also one of the key factors that breaks a community apart instead of heals us. And so they kind of talked about that in the end of the film, was that the importance of fighting against polarization, the importance against fighting the media about, rhetoric that kind of sensationalizes things. And they kind of talked about that in the beginning of the film as to why they didn't lean into the fact that it could have been a hate crime from the beginning, but they didn't confirm it. And so now with this conversation, we're going to start some Q&A And if anyone has any questions, just kind of raise your hand and someone from our team will give you a microphone so everyone can hear you and also so that the camera can catch it because they're recording. Yeah,
And it doesn't have to be a question. It can also be an observation.
that too. Yeah.
Thank you. I am Elif from Turkey. I'm a visiting scholar here, and I really appreciate this program. And I would like to thank you, first of all, for organizing such a program. Actually, mine is not a question. I would like to just say my thanks to you and a comment maybe. The other day, I talked to a professor here, and he told me that for some reason he was in a country in Middle East for some time, and he for that kind of for his role there, he had to read Quran, and he was like, well, I didn't see anything bad in that book. So yeah, it's like kind of tragicomic. I am also a Muslim, and I was really happy to hear that. At the same time, as I felt really unhappy about this, because this is, I think, a symbol of how biased we are to each other. But I am an optimistic person. I want to really believe that if we know each other, we can struggle these things. And I really believe that you cannot love the one that you don't know. So the first thing is, I mean, probably to kind of show some effort to know each other. And the other thing I would like to say is very important in this occasion is the language we use, because most of the time the bias is created with the language, the words. I mean, even sometimes we use these words unconsciously, but maybe we have to uh, think more about the words when we talk, or maybe we can just I don't know, but there can be maybe a study about this, the biased words about religions and these kind of things. And lastly, I would like to say that of course we wish that this crisis would never happen, but still this crisis, I think, just reveals our nature as a human being. I mean, in nature we are not bad. We can support each other, but I think there sometimes has to happen this kind of crisis to remind us this goodness in ourselves. So thank you.
Thank you. I think we have a question over here with Barry.
I was wondering what you. Oh, I have to. It's coming and going. I was wondering what you think about some of the stuff going on in the Supreme Court with some of the, like, the one that really struck me is what they're calling religious freedom. The football coach was able to hold prayers in the middle of the field, and he gathered all his kids around, and they say that's religious freedom. Of course, it was a Christian prayer, and I was thinking, had it been a Muslim prayer or anything else, I don't think they would have jumped on it and said, hey, this is religious freedom. They would have said, hey, you got to do that somewhere else. But they're letting them do it in the middle of the football field. And I was just wondering kind of where you stand on that or what you think about that.
Thank you very much. Well, I think, many people who try to pray, Muslims who try to pray in public, some of them have been harassed. So I think there is some double standard here sometimes. But if it's freedom of expression, everybody of any faith, whether the three monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, or Hinduism, or Buddhism, or any other religion, they should have the same right to the same free speech.
You'd be interested actually this year in February 2023, just before the National Football League finals that were held in Phoenix, at the new center of the Center of Muslim Experience in the US, we organized precisely a discussion on faith and football, because this is a very important issue for a lot of the football players, it appears. And the two speakers in that one was a retired NFL, both of them retired NFL players, Hamza Abdullah, who was born and raised a Muslim. His parents were Muslim, so he's not a convert. And Matt Ware, who is a Catholic and now a born again Christian. And the discussion in that discussion very clearly, you can watch it if you are interested. We can send you a copy of that video to watch it and what they discussed. Religion is very important in football. And from Hamza Abdullah, what we understood that when I think his brother was the first one to do the prostration after he scored a goal, and he was censored for that, for doing it. But now it has become acceptable because, as you said, if it's a Christian display of religion, it is more agreeable. But if it's something else, it is not. But I think now it has slowly become more evident as people talk about it, and it's accepted. So I think we have come a long way from 10, 15 years ago, when no other form of faith tradition was allowed on the field except a Christian prayer. But if you're interested, you can go to our Center for the Study of, not the study of conflict, but Muslim Experience in the United States, in an ASU center, brand new center, and you can see the video there of this discussion, precisely this discussion.
I will also try to link that in the resources email for those who RSVP'd over Eventbrite. You'll get an email for a spreadsheet that has a bunch of resources that are relevant to this discussion. And then also if our panelists would like to share anything, I can also put it in there, so it'll be there. Do we have any other questions?
I'm curious about what people thought about that line, which struck me something about progress is made one funeral at a time, or that's an interesting kind of comment. So I just wondered what people's responses to that, because it sounded so definitive. The panelists maybe, or anybody could address that. It was one of those that jumped out, and I was wondering if somebody else kind of paused on that a moment too.
But also the image that went with it, right? It was a Confederate soldier.
Well, I noticed was a cemetery.
Yeah, but
Okay.
no, there was a Confederate
Okay.
soldier. So a funeral at a time. And he said, it's not the right or wrong. It's just the way it is. It's status quo, right? We don't change here. That's how I saw it. And all these newcomers are trying to change. Yes, there is amity developing among a certain group of people, but we really don't want the top to change much, because that would disrupt how power is controlled here. That's how I saw it.
Anybody else have a response to that?
I took it the same way that you did, and it's the very nature of conservatism. They don't want to change. Anything that means change is bad, and they see it as bad. So that I took it exactly the same way, and I was just like, what? What did you just say? And so it just was, and I've lived in that area as well. I went to school in Houston, so I understand very much how that kind of thought process is there. But I think all of you have said it, it's about educating people and getting them familiar with people that are different and letting them know it's okay for us all to be different. We're still all people. So
I saw another line that interested me is they would ask the other religious leaders, what do you think about the mosque burning? Oh, that shouldn't happen to people of faith. And then they go to another person, what do you think of the mosque burning? Oh, that shouldn't happen to people of faith. These are good people of faith. And I, as someone who's an atheist, I was thinking, what about people of no faith? I mean, is it okay to burn their, stuff to the ground? So yeah, it shouldn't happen to anybody, period, a person of faith or not, is what I was thinking.
Yeah, and I agree with most of all of what's said, but I also thought it was kind of the lazy way out. If you just wait for the people to die, it's you're trying not to actually have to change anything. You're just waiting for time to change something, and that just doesn't work. So
Yeah,
I thought it was a little bit ageist too. Because
absolutely.
why are we assuming that that kind of bias only resides in people who have white hair? I mean, I teach students and we see things all the time on social media where little kids are absorbing what other people have planted or showered. It was provocative, but kind of layered in all kinds of ways.
And just a comment on that, a follow up. No, for those who do not want to change, it's not that only that they do not want to change, they do not want to learn. They are not open to learning. Why do they say that they don't want to change? And as you said, why is it only people of faith? I mean, it should be to everybody. And so opening up and learning, as video and the documentary is suggesting, is very important.
Here, we have one more question in the back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The other thing, what struck me is that there seems to be an underlying notion that we want to put people in their place. We do that all the time. So somehow it gives us some comfort that we think we are able to put people in their place. And I think it requires stepping out of your comfort zone and really make an effort to meet other people, to know them, to get acquainted with their customs and their traditions and be open to it. And one thing I learned is that, and it's my mantra, is that we are one family of humanity. So that gives us the opportunity to be open to each other. And actually, I think it's a life necessity to be open to each other because it enriches your life so much. One thing I wanted to share is that we are from Europe. We are living in a community just outside of Amsterdam. And in our community of 200,000 people living there, we have almost 180 ethnicities living in our town. So the opportunity to meet other people from different cultures, from different religions is right at our doorstep. And we established in our hometown a house of peace, where people from all kinds of religions come together. And actually, one of the most wonderful things that happened is that there's a school started just last year, the School of Peace. So working on how can you meet each other, how can you value each other, I think education, like you mentioned, is very important. And also working on ignorance and just be kind to each other and open. I love this meeting. Thank you so much. I loved watching the movie also. It gives great thoughts to.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sylvia. I'm glad you talked about the humanities and humanity, and hence the project humanities. And as the mission is talking, listening, connecting, and that's why Thank you very much indeed, Professor Neil Lesser.
Thank you. And Dr. Zakia, do you have any last comments before we end the event?
Well, thank you to everybody for coming and being here for 2 hours. And I really congratulate you for building that house of peace and the school of peace. I think something we here can think about and work together. I'm a peace professor, and I think it's a wonderful idea that you shared this house of peace. But also what you said, that in your small community of 200,000 people, you have 180 nationalities. So you have a wonderful opportunity to learn. In the Quran, it says very clearly that I have made you into different nations and tribes, races, and nations so that you may know one another. The idea is to know one another. I made you different. I could have made you all alike, God says, right? I could have made you all the same. Then we would not have any problem. Oh, we are one big. But I made you different so that you may know one another. How do we know one another? That we only know one another by opening ourselves up, as you say, but also creating opportunities to meet one another. You just cannot randomly just start talking to people. I do that all the time. But nonetheless, I think these ideas that you had shared, creating community spaces where you come together for peace, I think is a wonderful idea. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank
And
you
thank you,
all
Professor
very much
Lester.
indeed
Yes.
for inviting us to be here with you. And thank you all for coming today. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and we hope to see you again. Thank you very much indeed.
And the feedback forms, we do want you to fill out. There is a back and a front. So please fill both sides out, because we do like feedback and we like getting your ideas. And while people are winding up, I think there's one final little comment as people want it. So back here in the back. Yeah. You're holding the microphone. Okay.
Sorry.
But you got to make it quick though. Okay. All right. Go ahead. You're on.
Sorry, my brain shifted because I thought we ended. It was in response to the line that you had pointed out, and my initial reaction to that was he's referenced the power structures in the United States. But then I was reflecting on the comment, and I was thinking about my dad's generation. There's a community of Nigeria. You mentioned Nigeria. There's a community of Nigerian immigrants, and it's my father's generation who are from southeastern Nigeria and experienced a genocide of sorts. And it was a situation where the group perpetuating the evil, one of their characteristics was that they were Islam. And so the symbols of Islam are tied to this really intense trauma in this particular community's history. And so that line about, do these people have to pass away in order for those things to be healed from our world? I was looking at it from a different angle, and I think the interfaith work that you're doing is the right path for, teaching. It's not. Yeah, I think that's the right way. So anyway, I'm leaving here with that. How to affect people on that level.
Well, and we're not afraid to go into those spaces of interfaith. I mean, Barry and Carol, two of our supporters and investors here, know that we've had programs on other interfaith, not only those that are aligned with Judeo-Christian faith, but also paganism and Satanism and all those things, and not all those things, but those other faith systems that folks tend to disagree and not think about in the same way that we kind of idolize Christianity. Yeah. And we're going to let our intern, Santi, give us the last comment.
And it's somewhat related to the previous comment, but with the fact that only about like 3% of the world population moves like outside of, I think it's like a country neighboring them, like outside of that space. It's interesting that and it's important for in a place that has so much diversity, even if it's not that much in the US, a lot of other places, there's so much less opportunity for that, like kind of collaboration and understanding. And I think that's why events like this and also interfaith movements are important. So I thought that was more of a direction to a solution than the comment about waiting for everyone to die out.
Yeah, yeah. And said by somebody intergenerationally here too. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. We have one more program that's coming up. I think it's after the holiday next week. And it is actually a series called Dispelling the Myths. And it is looking at the hard of hearing, blind, and the deafblind. And it will be in a space where we will actually experience the complexities of existing in a world that is so ableist. And we'd love for you to come and participate in that conversation. We have gone to lots of, not extremes, but we've done what we could to make sure that everybody has access. It will be both virtual and in person. So please go to our events page and join us for that event. And keep in mind that we'll be doing a series of other provocative programs in the spring. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Grab some snacks as you head out, and please leave your feedback forms. And as my friend David Hemphill said, if there is anything about this conversation that gets you thinking and wanting to know a little bit more, tell other people about what Project Humanities is doing with Talking This and Connecting. But if there's nothing that you got out of it, just sort of zip your lips and keep it to yourselves. Thank you very much and have a good evening. And you probably have these, but you don't have the new editions of them. Yes, and it's a little reminder.